Hello and welcome to another segment here at Live Week where we're doing an interview here with Tim Broom and Don Pezet, the co-founders of ITProTV. I'm Aubrey Spurgeon. I forgot to mention that. And, I've known you two for about 3 years now. So there's a lot of people here that know you a lot better than me for like 10 years plus. But I have no idea. How did you two meet? I want to start with that question.
Don, you want to...
It's a really weird story because it boils down to, it's a convoluted one. You ever hear, like in Spaceballs, where they say, like, I'm your brother's, uncle's, sister's, cousin's roommate?
But we weren't related.
We weren't, no. So not as closely as in Spaceballs. I had been a field technician out doing contract work, and I had almost finished my college degree back then at the University of Florida, and I had decided to move back to Gainesville to kind of finish that degree. And through a lady that worked at a school that I was supporting at the time, she said her son had just started teaching at a computer learning center in Gainesville, and that I should go check it out. It was brand new, just opened. And so I came into Gainesville and swung by, and it just happened to be Tim that had opened up that computer learning center.
Yeah, so it was about 2 months after we had opened the brick-and-mortar learning center here in Gainesville. Don walked in our office, and we had a training manager, Melanie. Melanie had spoken to Don, and she said, you've got to come meet this guy. He's wicked smart. And so I did, and I think we started, and we said, can you teach A+ next week? And you said, sure. And he did, and he was really good at it. And then I realized Don's pretty wicked smart.
Yeah.
Need to stay close to this guy.
They asked me kind of during the interview process. The company I worked for before, they had a rule that said if you worked on a technology, you had to be certified in it because it was contract work. So they didn't want to send you out to a new organization if you didn't know what you were doing. So over the time I had worked with them, I had put together a pretty sizable amount of certifications, just kind of working on a number of different things. And Tim and Melanie had asked me, they said, Don, what do you think would make you a good teacher? And I said, I don't know. I've never been a teacher. I'm good at technology, and I love to talk about it, and that's fun. I think it would parlay into teaching. And so they took a chance on me, which was certainly appreciated. And I got in there, and people seemed to like at least a little bit what I do.
Yeah, a lot.
Yeah. So I thought that would be a good question to kick us off. But just a reminder, if you're watching live right now, please send in your questions and I will be watching the chat and I'll be sure to get those questions answered for you. So let me take a question from the audience right now, just for fun. We have, all right, so from Dan K. So Tim and Don, how did Twit influence you? Because that's a big influence, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's a big one. I'll go back to the 1990s. I was watching the screensavers on Tech TV like every night, and my wife was terribly. It was so much pain for her for me to watch this every night that she couldn't stand it. And I was in the transportation business. I had traveled around about 8 different cities for 8 or 9 years, and when I really wasn't happy and I wanted to do something else with my life, she said, "Why don't you do something with computers? You watch this guy on TV all the time." And it was really Leo, and I owe that to Leo for inspiring me and helping me learn to the point where I realized that I wanted to do something with technology. So I quit my job, and I enrolled in the program in North Carolina, in Charlotte, North Carolina at the time, to work on my MCSE NT4. And it was that inspiration from Leo in the very beginning, and it's kind of got me into IT. A few years later, the Tech TV went to the G4, the gaming channel, and Leo went on to his Twit network. And I guess when it was around 2011, 2012, when we started getting inspired to start the ITProTV stuff, I told him, I was like, I know where we want to begin advertising, and it was going to be with Leo.
Yeah, and it's kind of like a fast forward 14 years,
Yeah.
and we had been doing classroom training at that point. We were like an authorized Microsoft training center. I was a Microsoft certified trainer, and Cisco. We were doing all authorized training, which means teacher in a classroom, and we had textbooks and all that, and that was how we were delivering it. And we had just kind of started the idea of creating ITProTV, and we said, let's do this online so it's easy for people to access, and let's try and keep it affordable, not like a lot of the training that we were already doing. But we also said, let's try and make it fun. And we started looking at the things that we watched, the blogs that we read, the news sites that we went to, and the other podcasts that we watched. And This Week in Tech, which is Leo's current podcast, and the whole Twit network, that was something that we both watched and we both enjoyed. And we said, wouldn't it be cool to make training like that was people talking about technology? I was a little worried that if we just kind of ripped off somebody's style or whatever, that might be a problem. And Tim, I'm the tech guy of the company, and Tim is the business guy. And he said something that I just never would have thought of, which is, let's go visit Leo. Yeah. And so we bought some plane tickets. We flew out.
Well, let me talk about, I was emailing Leo's team, and they didn't want to let us advertise on their platform because we were a startup, and they had like Audible and people that were big companies. And I said, well, we're coming to visit you. And so they said, okay, you can come visit. So we went to go visit him. I spoke to Lisa, that was his CEO then, now his wife. And I spoke to her and I said, look, this is not our first rodeo. We've been doing this for greater than 15 years. And this is why we do what we do. And this is the way that we're going to do it. And it's a lot like Leo and the Screensavers or This Week in Tech. It's kind of a mix of the two. And when we finally met Leo, he comes in and he says, so you're Tim Broom and you're going to be a customer of ours. And he goes to shake my hand. I said, Leo, I need a hug. It's been like, you don't understand the inspiration that you've been for me and the change in my life because everything he's done. And Leo, being the good guy that he is, he just hugged me right back as a bear hug. And really that started what was a great relationship, because the more he learned about our story and what we were doing and why we were doing it, he bought into it. And so he allowed us to pay him for advertising. And I'm grateful for that, because without Leo, I don't think that as a startup that we would be able to be where we are today.
Yeah.
And he's allowed us to reach a huge crowd of people. A lot of our members are people that came through the advertising that we do
all around the world.
On the Twit network.
Right.
Yeah, and we had a great interview with Leo that I think is airing tomorrow in the live episode, where we kind of talk about some of that.
Yeah, be sure to tune in for that tomorrow. That reminds me of a question I had, because it sounds like Leo is a good friend of yours, and I was wondering about you two. You guys are pals. You've been best friends probably for a very long time. What is it like to work with your best friend?
Good friends.
Good friends. Oh, okay.
It's nothing that I wouldn't call him a best friend, but it's more of like good friends. And it's probably tough to work with your best friend.
Probably.
Good friends is easy to work with.
Yeah.
And we enjoy to do things with each other.
Yeah.
Enjoy going to lunch, enjoy talking about subjects, enjoy arguing about technologies, and Don usually wins those. But I think it's just being good friends, and probably since the very beginning, is that we're able to build a great rapport and a trust with each other. And that's what really matters most.
And I think we've both been involved in other companies where maybe the culture wasn't as great as it could have been, or there was strife caused by different things. And we both acknowledged really early on that the main problem people run into in organizations is trust and honesty.
Yeah.
Right. So trust that your teammate, your partner, whatever, is going to deliver on what they say they're going to deliver on. And then honesty, like, if you're going to fail to deliver, to be honest about it and explain why and share that. And Tim and I've never had a problem going into your office and saying, I don't think this is right.
Right.
And you've done the same for me. And so as long as you keep open communications, it works really well. And honestly, it's kind of easier than a marriage, because I don't worry about hurting your feelings. And so it's worked out well.
Okay. Yeah. So as good friends, buddies, you came up with this idea. Oh, wow. You didn't turn off your Apple Watch.
As a professional, you and I are on camera all the time, so we know to turn that stuff off.
Power off.
Okay,
Sorry.
now it's off. All right. The next question I had, as friends, you came up with this idea together. How did you come up with ITProTV?
I remember the day we were working to try to grow the enrollments for the brick and mortar training center. And it was a bit of a struggle going through 2008, 2009, where enrollments were down. And we said, is there something that we can do for people to get started in IT, to get A+? Can we just get those guys started with something? And we had kind of evolved from the classroom to a remote online learning, where it's a bit like a webinar, where the instructor might be in the studio and the students could be from wherever. So we had kind of started to get into video and get a little taste of it. And the idea of this started, the lynda.com was someone that was doing a subscription-based. I think CBT was around. And we just decided to, I remember he was in a one of the classrooms prepping for something, and I kept interrupting him. I said, "What if we did this?" And so it was like a little Shark Tank. Every time I'd go pitch an idea, and then it just kind of worked out. And then we started looking at domain names, and it was ITProTV. And then Don said, "Well, I can't throw stones at that. That sounds pretty good."
Yeah.
So that's how it kind of started.
Yeah, one of the very first conversations we had was that we felt that the training we were creating already was great. That we had our students loved our teachers, but we could only reach people in the local area because it was classroom training, and it was expensive. And so what we talked about was that we had salespeople. Any company has salespeople, and they were trying to sell our training. And we were talking about what the big obstacle was, and how if they reached out to 100 people and only sold to one of them, that was a success. Those were good numbers. But what happened to the other 99 people? And we started kind of breaking down the other 99 people to find out why they weren't able to get in and do training. Not necessarily why we couldn't sell them or whatever, because that's not what it was all about. Why couldn't they get in there? And what it boiled down to was a huge portion of those people wanted IT training, but it was too expensive, or it was too difficult to set aside a week of your time or a month of your time, or to travel for the training. Like, there were all these obstacles to it. And we knew from our own personal experiences that being in IT has been a great career for us. It's supported us, our families, our friends. We have over 70 families here at ITProTV that are employees that we've been able to support through this. So IT has been phenomenal. We want that to be good for everybody else. So when we hear about somebody saying, "Oh, I'm stocking shelves at the grocery store and I hate it." Well, have you thought about IT? It's a great career. It's growing. There's new opportunities all the time. So it kind of hurt a little bit that there were these people that wanted help. They wanted to get in IT and they couldn't. And so we thought about us and what did we have to help us get into IT? And there really wasn't a whole lot. And so how could we make something better that is the product we wish we would have had when we got started?
Right.
That was something we said often. What do we wish that we would have had?
Yeah.
And that's what we wanted to create.
And that's how we started coming up with ITProTV.
Okay. So how did you two even get started in technology? Did you have it growing up as a kid? I know I definitely did. You're a little bit older than me. I hope that's not rude to say.
A little bit.
You definitely had technology as a kid. So what is it that started your career in technology?
So for me, I actually didn't have a lot of exposure to computers in school. In fact, in high school, I remember this vividly. All 4 years of high school, I used a computer one day.
Oh, wow.
1 day out of 4 years. It was a phenomenal high school. I recommend it to anybody. So anyhow, it just wasn't a part of that. But I had an older brother, and he was going off to do aerospace engineering or whatever was kind of what his goal was. My family didn't have a history of going to college. We were going to be the first generation going to college. He started getting into computers, and I started kind of learning from him as a hobby. And so at home, I was messing around with computers, but I wanted to go to law school. That was my goal in high school. So when I went to college, I was doing political science. That was my plan, and then to transition into law school. And to pay for college, because I didn't have the greatest grades. I didn't have huge scholarships, so I had to, pay for it somehow. I was building and selling computers on the side. And so I would just assemble them, sell them, and then support them for a period of time. It was kind of enough to cover tuition. And it was towards the end of my political science degree, when it was kind of too late to change majors and stuff, that I decided, I don't think I want to go to law school. I think I really like computers, and I want to switch and do this full time. And so that's when I learned about certifications, because I had this experience on my resume, but it wasn't something I could go and say, well, yeah, I ran Don's computer shop and I built computers. That doesn't look good on a resume. And so I learned about like CompTIA's A+ certification, which I then studied for and got, and that kind of launched my actual professional IT career. But it all stemmed from that idea of just loving computers and it being a hobby and something I wanted to work with as an actual career.
And I think a lot of people around ITProTV, they started with a little bit of gaming. So had some gaming interest back in the Pong, Atari 2600, Atari 5200. I had a neighbor who had an Atari 400, another neighbor that had a TRS 80. So that kind of, as a young person, that allowed us to kind of play a little bit in those sandboxes. And then when my wife and I got married 23 years ago, we bought our first computer. And it was a Pentium 150 with Windows 95. And that, with an AOL account, just changed my world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
AOL, that did it.
AOL did it. So
You've got mail.
Earlier, you mentioned something along the lines of when you were getting started, coming up with the idea for ITProTV, you said that CBT Nuggets was around. And so
Sure.
we had a question from somebody on Twitter. I think their Twitter handle is Garredith, @Garredith. Their question was, what was the original goal for being distinct amongst the competition, like Pluralsight and the rest, like
Yeah.
CBT Nuggets? Yeah.
Sure.
I think the biggest difference, and I'll just kind of briefly say this before you jump in, is we wanted to take what was best about the classroom experience, because I think whenever anyone learns, we still send our kids to school and our young kids to grade school and classroom, and our students to go to college, and mainly in the classroom. So if we could recreate what's the best experience about a classroom, and that might be where you ask a question that I haven't thought of yet, but it's that community involvement, something that's entertaining and engaging. That's really what we wanted to create, and that's what started the format of the multi-person, of having the host and the subject matter expert. And if we could win that, then I think it would be entertaining enough for people to watch, like me, because I needed something that was entertaining, not a script reading voice over a desktop or a PowerPoint. That was the biggest thing for us in the beginning.
Yeah, and we actually made a list at one point, like the pros and cons of our old model, and we said we want to bring the pros with us and leave the cons behind. So then we just had to address how to replace the cons and recreate the pros. For me personally, because I do hold a number of IT certifications, in the early days of my career, I bought training from CBT Nuggets. I've used it. I enjoyed it. It's good training. I used Train Signal. I bought numerous practice exams from Transcender, which is now Kaplan IT.
Kaplan
What are
IT.
they called? So they've changed names, but it was Transcender for the longest time. I love their practice exams. That was all technologies that I used, but as you watch those videos, we would see things like, first off, it's usually a voice over a PowerPoint.
Mm-hmm.
So I watched hours and hours of training from other vendors, and I could not tell you a single instructor's name. I either never knew it or forgot it, just because you don't build any
You
kind of
certainly
connection.
wouldn't recognize them because you don't see them.
No, yeah, you just see a PowerPoint or their desktop, right? So there was that. It also was very heavily edited, which made it boring. It was a lecture. You're basically just listening to a college lecture, and that doesn't create engagement and fun. And then the other thing was, if I had a question in a classroom, you raise your hand, say, "Hey, teacher, I don't understand." But when you're just watching a video, you can't ask a question. Or if you're reading a book, you can't ask a question. So how do you learn more? How do you find out if something doesn't quite make sense? You don't have a way to do it. So with ITProTV, we said, all right, first off, we got to show people. We've got to show the teachers. We want people to see them and start to build a connection. So when you watch our content, like 99% of the time, you see the person's face on screen, or at least whoever's talking at the time. And then we had to make it where there was a way for people to ask questions. So we said, hey, let's just do it live, right? And put a chat room on there, and people can ask if they watch it live. But we know that most people aren't going to watch it live because of schedules and availability, or maybe we filmed it 6 months ago and you just decided you wanted that cert today. So the Q&A forums that you could jump in and post questions to, and our teachers,
Right.
look in there and answer the questions. And then we kind of looked at the teacher side and said, we don't want to lecture. We don't want people that are just teaching. We sit around and talk about IT all the time. And Tim and I will just sit there, and if nobody interrupts us, we'll go on for hours about the new iPhone or whatever. And we wanted to recreate that on camera where it was fun. It was two people talking. And that's why we said, we're not going to have teachers. We're not going to have instructors. We're going to have edutainers, right? We want to be entertaining, but it's all about educational content. So you're learning while you watch. We can't just make it all entertaining. We'd be doing, I don't know, whipped cream pies in each other's face for an hour. You wouldn't learn a thing, right? So you got to have a little bit. But that was all part of what came together. And we really feel that that's what differentiates us the most from our competitors, right? There's plenty of people that do video streaming training online. There's subscription services. There's outright purchase. There's a lot of stuff. There's people that create training for the same certifications as us, but where we differentiate is the passion and personality we bring to the product, but also how quickly we produce our content. Because we don't, well, sometimes we use contractors, but typically we have our on-staff people. You see Ronnie, Vaughn, Mike, Wes, Cherokee, Joe, Adam, me, I guess. Damn it, I thought I could name everybody just right off a whim. Aubrey, yeah, absolutely. And so, everybody is full-time here, and so they're able to get in and create content, and we always try and be first to market, because I used to get frustrated where a new cert would come out and there was no training. And so all I had was a list of exam objectives, and maybe I had worked with it enough to go and pass it. I used to do that with like Citrix exams because you knew they would never make a book. But there were other ones that were so big, like the Cisco certification or CEH, where the objectives lists are so huge that you needed something to study from. And so with ITProTV, we always try and be very quick to market with the content, and our production cycle is very, very fast.
And we talk about if we remove the obstacles to people's success, and whether that's convenience, it's time, it's money, it's quality. If we just remove those obstacles to their success, then everyone would be more successful. And hopefully then they'll tell 10 friends, and then we'll be able to grow organically like that.
Right. Okay. So from the same person at Garrett, he actually had, it was a two-part question. The second part kind of went with what Don was just talking about, our edutainers, how we have that two-person format. If I'm understanding his wording correctly, he asked, did you originally want a very limited number of staff to repeat and host various classes, or did it just happen that way? And you kind of answered the question, but maybe...
Yeah, originally we actually had a vision that's kind of evolved a little bit, right? Because we were really focusing on career changers, people that were just getting into IT. And people just getting into IT are really focused in on like 5 or 6 different certifications, A+, Net+, Security+, MCSA, MCSE, which are all changing names now. There was the CCNA, Cisco CCNA, maybe VMware, right? Those were kind of the big ones that people wanted. And so we didn't need a whole lot of staff to create that. And so we had people like Daniel that we hired on to just be a host. Now, he is an IT guy. He's got a background, but I just wanted him to host for us. But we had other people be the subject matter experts. Over time, though, we started getting a lot of demand from businesses and from more advanced users who wanted something beyond the basic training that we had. And that's when we started kind of expanding out. And we worked with people like Adam Gordon, he's been full-time with us. How long, Tim? 2-3 years?
2-3 years.
But we've worked with him for 20 years?
At least. Yeah. We kind of had a relationship with everyone who worked with us previously, or that we had a relationship with from friends and being networking. So with each person having an area of their subject matter expertise, they're an expert or a champion of a particular subject matter area, that's where they get to focus on. So if they're not in the studio, they're prepping and learning that new course to be able to present it in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, just for you guys out there, if you're wondering, where we find our edutainers, it is really, really, really hard to find IT people that are very knowledgeable on a topic and able to communicate in a pleasant way in front of a camera.
Unicorn.
We call them unicorns, right? They're hard to find. And when we draw up our budget each year, I might say, I don't need to add any edutainers, so I don't put anybody in the budget. But then if I encounter somebody out there, and I'll use Joe Peacock as an example. I was not actively searching for another edutainer. We had some people that were asking for ITIL training, so we knew ITIL was important, but I didn't have anybody who could do it, and it wasn't enough demand to warrant bringing in a contractor. But finally, we did reach a point where we said, all right, let's bring her in as a contractor, and she came in, and she did such a phenomenal job that we just started kind of chipping away at her every time we would talk to her. So, you ever think about moving to Florida? It's very nice here. Not today. It's storming outside.
Yeah.
But it's a beautiful state.
Yeah.
Lots of beaches. And,
no taxes.
And then we lucked out, and eventually she said, I kind of would like to move to Florida. And so we snatched her up and got her here creating content. But we also have a ton of people that we know from our classroom training days. So we already know, are they a good teacher? Are they a good speaker that's able to manage time and all of that? And that gives us a little bit of an advantage. We're not taking a big risk. Now, there are some people like Aubrey over here that we do take a risk on, where you came on as an intern.
Yeah, I was an intern first in the production team, and then I was a director.
For like a summer,
yeah,
and then you
for a
left to go back
summer,
to school.
And then I left, finished my degree, came back. But yeah, they took a chance on me as an edutainer. Look at me, I'm interviewing the founders right now. I do like ABBA. So.
Yeah, we were looking for another host because we were starting to create more and more content. When we moved into this building, we went from 2 studios to 5 studios, so that was a lot more. So we needed some extra help, and we decided to do like a casting call internally in the company. Aubrey was working in the production team, and so she got to jump from behind the camera to in front of it and did a phenomenal job. So we're always looking for people like that.
Yeah. A question from Kala N, which is actually one of the questions I had. So let's go ahead and ask it. How does the IT Pro TV of today compare to what you envisioned when you decided to start IT Pro TV? A lot happens in, what is it, almost 5 years now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's over 5 years.
Yeah.
There's definitely been an evolution. Previously, I think we were technology type people that were working into doing video. And then when Brad came on board, he brought that professionalism and what do you call him, the videographer, producer?
Brad is he's our director of production, but he is kind of like our lead engineer. And he comes from a TV background and is just a phenomenal talent who he is never on camera, but really is an unsung hero of IT Pro TV.
Definitely. So when you bring Brad on board, he takes it to a whole nother level. And if you talk about the format, I think the format was very similar to what we originally envisioned, because if you look at one of our studios and how an episode goes, it's 25 to 30 minutes. Maybe it needs to be 15 to 20 minutes, from some of the feedback we get. And so we might be, modifying a little bit. But for the most part, it looks a lot like Leo Laporte on the Screensavers when they're talking about technology going back to the 90s. It's entertaining, it's engaging. There's a host and a subject matter expert talking about something. And that format was very similar to what we had. It's just the quality has evolved to much better. And the content itself is a lot broader range than what we had originally envisioned.
Yeah, and there was a meeting we had early on in the company where we said, you know what, let's do Barry calls it blue sky planning, which is just what's your dream? If we had limitless cash, what would ITProTV look like? And we started to draw up a organizational chart, right? What employees we needed in what areas, and we came up with an org chart that had 25 people, and we said. Because at the time we probably had 12 employees. So this is over doubling our staff. And we said, I can't really see anywhere else we'd need more people.
Nope.
This should do it, right?
Nope.
And here we are today with...
We're never going to get bigger.
We're at, what, 73 employees. And I know tons of people on staff right now that are working way harder than they should. So we could certainly stand to expand some more. Part of that has come from just increased demand. Developers are really where we've added a lot. We have a number of engineers on staff that help to design the website and the apps and things like that you guys use to watch our content. But also people like Brad. When we started, we didn't know anything about cameras and lights and microphones. Hey, switches, routers, servers, I can configure those all day long. But you put me in front of one of these LED lights, I don't know what a lumen is, or...
We had to learn.
Yeah, and so we just stumbled through it blindly. A lot of times we went over to Leo's studio and just bought whatever equipment he had.
Took a picture of everything he had and said, we'll just buy this.
Yeah.
It's a true story.
Probably not going to go wrong. Yeah. But we didn't know how to configure it, right?
Yeah.
We never, or at least I never envisioned us being a state-of-the-art studio. And we mentioned Brad. I'm going to talk about Brad a little bit more. He was involved. He was the head of engineering for a university here in town, and he had done some massive projects, things that were live sports events on national television. I mean, this man is just at the top of his career trade, and we had even joked about it. Tim and I, like, man, wouldn't it be awesome to have somebody like that on our staff who really knew what they were doing? But there's no way they'd come and work here. And to have reached out to him, or he even reached out to us and said, if you guys are ever interested in hiring an engineer, just let me know. And
I got back in the car with Don. It's like, oh, we're doing this.
Yeah. It wasn't even a debate. There was no interview. It was just, how do we get him on board?
It's a done deal. We just got to figure out how we do it.
Yeah.
And, what he does here as far as, improving our technology, he also is a phenomenal trainer himself and has built a production team, Megan, Titus, we have newer team members like Parker, Corolla, Taylor. Who am I leaving out? We have
Don keeps trying to name everybody.
Courtney,
yeah.
absolutely. Or I'm supposed to say Brittany instead of Courtney.
Oh,
so you got to get her name wrong.
Inside joke?
So that production team, some of them are right out of college, and Brad mentors them and works with them, and they become phenomenal talents. And we're fortunate to have each and every one of them. That's all stuff that we didn't think about on day one in ITProTV. We thought about, how are we going to film A+? How are we going to film Net+? We were just thinking about the certifications, and now we're thinking about, how do we make the video look really nice? How do we make sure that people can understand what our edutainers are saying, but not burden the edutainers, so that Ronnie can go in and do CCNA and not have to worry about lights and camera and all that. And Brad's team knocks that out, and they do it flawlessly every day. So that's a big change for how we originally envisioned things.
Yeah, if it wasn't for them, we wouldn't have Live Week right now.
Absolutely
Yeah.
not.
So next question I have. So in that time, these 5 years, what has been the biggest challenge you two have faced with ITProTV?
The biggest challenge, we've had a few.
Yeah.
You know, we've tried to establish official partnerships with several certification vendors. It's tough because a lot of the official certification pathways that are out there, like with Cisco and Microsoft, if you do their official training, you have to charge a ton of money for it. Because you have to provide a book and do all this other stuff. I mean, it's really, really expensive. But we want to do a low-cost subscription, an affordable subscription. And so overcoming that has been a challenge. And in the early days, there were a lot of people that wouldn't consider ITProTV because they would say, like, I want VMware training, but you guys aren't VMware authorized, so we're not going to do that. But what we found was that people were going and doing the authorized training and not being successful. And so we just started creating training anyway that wasn't authorized. And people would do the authorized training and then come and watch ours and then go and actually get certified and really like that. So that made for an interesting time in the early days to identify what content we wanted to film. And now that we've grown and our name has gotten out there, now we actually are authorized. You know, all of our ITIL content is fully accredited. We're not just authorized with CompTIA. We are the sole official video training partner for CompTIA. Like, we're the only one in their marketplace. So vendors have now recognized that we create great stuff, but it wasn't always like that. And we got a lot of pushback in the early days of the company.
I'm going to go with a little bit of a business angle and say that growth is expensive, and we are bootstrapped. We have not taken on any funding, any private equity funding. I was able to sell the brick and mortar business and use some of that capital to get us started. But when you grow really fast, to get into this 28,000 square foot building, it's expensive. And some of those challenges that we have, it's a whole nother podcast to talk about the private equity experience and where we kind of went to market to try to raise some money. That's another story. Happy to talk about that later in a part two.
Let us know if you want us to do a podcast on that.
But, probably managing the growth financially. The second part of that, I would say the people. I love everybody at ITProTV. I truly do. And I think that because we've been together for 15 to 20 years with a lot of them, it's tough when you are working with people and you're trying to help them get better. I'm trying to get better and improve myself. They're trying to improve. And you face those challenges when you care about somebody so much, but you still have a business that you have to operate. That can be really hard emotionally sometimes. And that's what you think about when you lay in bed at night and stare at the ceiling.
It's hard to do an employee review of somebody who you've watched get married, have kids, buy their first house,
buy the first car.
Yeah. And, all of that. It's a family.
Yeah.
And we have employees that we've known a long time. We've had employees that we've only known a year, that are new. But we always try and welcome them in. And hopefully that comes across on camera, that when you see one of our edutainers who's working with a host, that they know each other really well. Yeah. And that's
like 58 mortgages that we're responsible for.
That's a lot of pressure.
Yeah.
So we have a ton of questions coming in from the chat, so I want to make sure to get to those. So I'm just going to start jumping around in there.
Okay.
Sure. First question I'm going to go with is from Sarah H. Tim and Don, what was your first computer, and what is your favorite piece of technology?
Acer Pentium 150.
Oh, he knows.
Mine was a TI 99.4A.
Okay.
That would be my first one, which is a piece of junk. I mean, well, now, but at the time it was awesome. And then what was the other part of the question?
Favorite piece of technology.
You know what? I'm going to go with OS2, which you can probably see back there on the shelf. I've got every version of OS2 from version 1 on.
OS2 was solid and stable. I worked on it.
Yeah, and it's dead in the water.
Right there. And then from Joe S., what piece of technology do you wish existed? Like maybe something from sci-fi world or a movie like that?
Oh,
I'm sure.
For me, this is easy.
Or just make it up. But
teleporter, right? Like travel time sucks. That's and I get car sick. So being able to go to a city or go to work or whatever instantly, teleporter.
I just want Bluetooth to work.
That would be nice. That would be nice.
Okay, so another question. A lot of people are asking about this one. So what is the plan for Android, Roku, and Fire TV?
Oh, it's coming.
It's coming.
Do we get to overcommit our engineering team?
Well, the Android, I think, is we'll have it internally this month, so it should be released next month. Was the question about Fire TV and Roku?
Yes. Yeah.
Those are the two that are in waiting, and really, we need to know from our audience, from our membership, how important those things are for us to make that investment in there. I believe that Roku we were going to do next, and update them to the same look and feel as the other one, so we can be much more consistent. And when we roll out updates, we'll do an iOS, Android, Roku, Fire TV. If we do Fire TV again, all at the same time.
Yeah, and
So
just
we're
to
about to get on that schedule.
put a lot of this stuff into perspective, each of these apps, well, Android and iOS are kind of a given. They're incredibly expensive. We've spent.
And did I mention we were bootstrapped?
Yeah, we have spent literally hundreds of thousands of dollars on these apps so far.
Hundreds and hundreds.
Yeah, and
How many $30 per month subscribers do?
It takes a lot. So each of these platforms to launch, it's like a minimum of $30,000 to get one created. So we want to create whatever platforms you all feel are absolutely needed, but we don't want to just throw a dart in the dark and try it out. So Fire TV, for example, we have a Fire TV app. It's not very good.
It's on the bubble right now, iffy. So if you want it, let us know.
Yep, absolutely. But Android is coming. That one's going to be soon, and then we'll start looking at probably Roku next.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. For Rudy K out there, they ask, aside from Dawn, this is a fun question. Aside from Dawn, who was the first edutainer, and how did you find them?
All right, so
let me tell the story.
Okay.
Because when we first started ITProTV, again, we were bootstrapped. We were running the brick and mortar training business simultaneously as we started up ITProTV. And a lot of the team were teaching courses at night or classrooms at night. And I asked them during the daytime, I said, I can't pay you because this is like a startup that we're just trying to put together without money. But if you come and you create content with us, I'll take care of you in the long run. And we had built up that trust. So Ronnie, Mike, and Wes. Mike was one of the funniest because he was so nervous on camera. He would get wet underneath his arms. He had to change shirts, in between episodes because he was like so nervous to overcome, from being in front of a camera. But it was Wes, Mike, Ronnie, you.
I think that was it in the very beginning.
Yeah, so they all created content, and we created the same course over and over and over because we're constantly finding ways that we can improve and get better. But those guys, God bless them, they worked for nothing, and I told them I would take care of them, and I have, I think, many times over since then. But I'm very thankful for them trusting and buying into what our vision was and what our dream was.
So it was a group then. That was the first edutainers, not just one. Yeah.
It was, and just to add a little more to it, I know A+ was the first thing we produced, and it was mostly, I believe, Ronnie and I in that, but Mike and Wes were also filming at the time. And that was when my youngest son was born, he was born 3 months premature. So my wife and I, we had to be at the hospital a lot for a long time. And for that period of time, you're starting a new company, and now you're out a lot. Those guys, they stepped up and covered my slack in the beginning. And this company would not be here today if it wasn't for the extra work that they put in. And then it was just probably the next year that we started roping in other people like Cherokee Vaughn, who helped us design the original website. She actually came back. Daniel, they all just kind of came on from there.
Yeah, it's awesome. Awesome story.
Yeah, that is amazing. And they're still here to this day. It's amazing. I know them now, and I've only been here for 3 years, if you want to count internship. So Jamie asks, this is for Tim specifically. So, Tim, where do you see ITProTV in 10 years?
I've been asked that question a lot lately.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that we've barely scratched the surface. If you look at how big the marketplace is, it's like a $50 billion market that's spent on learning. Still greater than half of that is spent in the classroom. So half of that is online. Pluralsight's doing what, 250, 300 million a year. Linda's doing about 150 million a year. CBT Nuggets is around 50 million a year. And, we'll do 13 this year. So we have a lot of opportunity for growth. All we really need to do is create more and more of a raving fan base for people to tell their friends about ITProTV. And they see us, ITProTV, as another tool in the toolkit for an IT professional, something that they want to have as an ongoing resource because everything can be searched because of the transcriptions. Something that they want to continue to always learn when there's a new product or they were told they need to implement, a cloud strategy. They know that we're going to have a solution for them. is that I think we can continue to expand in that IT Pro space. Ultimately, I do see some other areas of growth in the Office Pro TV, the Dev Pro, the Biz Pro for leadership, sales, teams type things. And I think we can go on from there and create others. I don't want that to be a distraction because I think there's so much room for growth in the IT area. But in 10 years, that's twice as long as we've been around. So I try to think far and far down the road of where we might be.
What about you, Don? I assume it's probably around the same vision, right?
Yeah, I don't worry so much about the money side of things.
Okay.
That's usually the worry of Tim.
Yeah.
For me though, just becoming that trusted provider when people think, I want to get this certification, and they come to ITProTV first. They don't necessarily say like, let me check out Pluralsight because I was using that at work. They think ITProTV, that's the first thing that pops into my mind. I'd love for us to be authorized with every vendor that we create training for people like Microsoft to say, all right, the old model is dead. We'll finally acknowledge that. Let's go ahead and embrace this other content. That would be really nice. But also just growth. Right now we film in we have 5 studios, but we really usually have about 3 active at any given time during the day, and then they sit idle all night. We could start creating content in the evening, in the middle of the night for people that are in different time zones, other countries. We have a lot more capacity, and we could branch out even beyond IT to create training in a number of other areas. It's all possibilities that I think we'll kind of look into over the next 10 years.
All right. Next question comes from Ron H. out there, and this one is aimed towards Don since I got a Tim one last time. Don, if you had to work as an IT technician now, which field would you pick, and what would you specialize in?
Oh, that's a tough one.
Yeah.
So I love networks. Networks are a lot of fun for me. I've got a lot of experience with Cisco and Juniper and a few other vendors. So working in a network would kind of be easy, but what I really enjoy, it's kind of a weird thing, is like a network operations center, a monitoring solution where I like having a large network before me and being able to dig into the statistics and the data and the information to find out where things operating at peak performance, where things are degraded, but you might not see a failure, but you can actually identify issues there. That's the kind of stuff I like. I like digging into problems like that. So, with the cloud providers that are out there now, like Google and Microsoft and Amazon, their networks are incredibly massive, incredibly robust, and I think it would be a ton of fun to monitor and try and maintain some of those. So I'd fall into the networking realm, but I'm a big Linux guy, a big Apple guy. There's a lot of stuff that I like to work with that is kind of aligned alongside that. So I could certainly do a number of different things, but I think the networking side is where I'd fall.
So from Dan S., he asks, because it kind of goes with what you're talking about, how many certifications do either of you have? And then total number of certs for the staff. Ooh, that'd be a hard number to figure out. I don't even know.
That would be a hard one.
Yeah.
I'm pretty easy. I have like 4.
Okay, yeah.
But I quit a long time ago.
So I don't actually know how many certifications that I have because
I have a video that they're all listed.
Yeah, I think
between you and Adam,
yeah.
all the hosts.
Adam has more than me, absolutely.
Yeah.
He's got like over 100. I don't think I have.
There's
100.
a video on YouTube that you need to search for about our edutainers and the certifications. It's a great video, and they're all listed.
Keep in mind, I've been in IT since the late 1990s, and I have been getting at least 4 certifications a year ever since then over the last 20 years. So I've got quite a few, but it's just because of how long I've been involved in it. I think to be a successful person in IT, I want to qualify all this. You really only need like 3 or 4 to really set yourself apart from the crowd. So don't feel like you need to get 80 or having 80 means you're something special. Like it's just.
He has a secret room in his house where all the certificates are all over the walls, and I'm sure he does.
Well, hang on.
Are there some here?
I have a box over here of a bunch of my certificates. You can't
really see it. It's right there, yeah.
So we've been in this building for what, 2 years now? Almost 3?
Yeah.
And I put that box under that table probably the second day we moved into this building, and I have still not hung a single one of those things. So the rest are in a folder in a drawer back over there.
But it's got Star Trek stuff on the shelf.
Yes.
Well, that was more important.
Yeah, of course. It's obviously more important. Okay, so last question. We're almost out of time here. So Lydia T., I thought this was a fun one. I wanted to end on a fun one. If you could recruit any person, dead or alive, to be an ITProTV edutainer, who would you pick?
Ooh, that's a
I like this
that's
one.
a toughie. Boy, I could approach this a few different ways. I'm gonna go Ben Stein.
Okay.
I think Ben Stein would be a ton of fun because he's a brilliant guy, and that monotone, deadpan voice of his. I think if we pair him with Ronnie, it would just
Ooh.
blow people's minds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I could see that. What about you, Tim?
Nobody's better than Don Pezet.
Wow.
Don
I
brings
think-
personality to information better than anybody.
I mean, I want to change my answer to Tim. Sorry, Tim. I meant Tim.
I think maybe, does that get you to best friend level now?
Bestie.
Good friends plus.
Okay, so we are now out of time. This has been an interview with the founders of ITProTV, Tim Broom and Don Pezet. Thank you both so much for your
Thank you.
time. I had a lot of fun with you guys. You're very cool, very interesting people, and I love what you've done with the place. I love my job. Please keep me. I'm going to throw it back to Zach, and please keep enjoying Live Week.